Why, hello there. Brent here, the Bring Your Own Tools, and on today's episode, we're completely transforming this old space from this to this. If you want to know how to do it, keep on watching. Let's get started.
For this project, we have multiple scenarios, whether it's the downstairs, the upstairs, or even the stairwells. We have a different type of installation methods for each one.
For this project, we have two different installation methods because we have two different subfloors. This one is an OSB subfloor, and down there we have a concrete slab on grade. That means we're going to be actually nailing this in place and gluing that in place. But we actually are all starting right here due to the fact that we have stair nosing we need to install that's adjacent and connects into our wood flooring. This is important because of the fact that it's going to be very highly used and highly seen, obviously. So we want to make sure that it looks as good as humanly possible, but it also is as structurally sound as possible. So let's get to materials and then we'll get to installing.
This is the stair nosing that we're going to be utilizing for this project from Flooring Direct Warehouse. Now, the beautiful thing about this material is that not only is it beautiful and structurally sound because it's an engineered hardwood flooring product, but it also matches our flooring perfectly because it's made of the same exact product. I'll be going into much further detail about this product when we actually start the stairwell, but in the meantime, let's go and get our staircase fully prepped out and ready for installation. This entire area was completely carpeted before I got to it, and luckily for me, I didn't have to worry about removing the carpet, which was a nice added bonus to take on this project. But because this stairwell area was carpeted, it means that it doesn't have a proper finished look, which basically means we need to do some prep work before we even get to flooring. Luckily for us, all we have to do is remove the front lip of the stair nose, which in the industry they call out as a carpet nosing on stairwells. Once that's taken care of, we can then measure our stair nosing to the appropriate length, mark it, and cut it. And as you can see, I did add a bit of painter's tape just to make sure we had the cleanest cut possible. We do have some stair skirts in this circumstance as well, so I measure and mark those out and cut them with our table saw. And you don't have to use a table saw, but because these are going to be finished cuts, I want to make sure they are as clean of a cut as possible. I of course double check our measurements and make sure that it fits very snugly, and as you can see, it did. But now let's move on to the actual flooring.
With any hardwood flooring project, it all starts with a good quality product, and that's why we went with this beautiful 6-inch wide white oak from Flooring Direct Warehouse. Now, they really provide an amazing product that has a really thick veneer, which you do want to see, especially for durability and strength. And the nice thing is that it comes in so many different sizes, from 23 inches all the way up to 86. It gives us a full array of sizes and shapes to choose from. Before you install, you do want to bring this material into the space approximately 24 to 48 hours prior to actually installing it, because you want it to have a natural acclimation to the surrounding space, humidity, and temperature. So now that we have that done, it's time to install.
With most hardwood flooring projects, you generally want to go off of a very straight wall that's a large wall in the room, which I will be doing and showcasing on our lower level slab on grade area. However, because we're starting off with a nosing, we need to do the difficult part first, and then we get to the easy part. This first piece of flooring is going to be wrapped around the wall that's adjacent to the kitchen, and therefore I measure and cut out a perfect section with a jigsaw. Just remember, the edges of these cuts don't have to be perfect due to the fact that wall base will be right on top of it. In order to make sure that our flooring is perfectly square all the way across the room, I want to make sure that this first board measures the exact same length from one side to the other, and if that's the case, then we know that we'll be perfectly square all the way across the room. But before we install any flooring, we have to do a bit of prep work. And the first thing is to make sure you run a vacuum over the entire surface to make sure we have a beautifully clean work surface to work upon. Now it's time for underlayment. And for underlayment, we're using this cork base underlayment. This is a superior underlayment, and it not only provides a layer of protection for the subfloor and the flooring, but it also provides some thermal aspects as well as has a 6mm vapor barrier. It's extremely easy to cut with a sharp utility knife, and once I have it positioned correctly, I can then permanently position it with a few staples. And when I say a few staples, like quite a few staples all the way down, because you don't want to tape the seams based upon the manufacturer's recommendations for engineered wood flooring to an OSB subfloor. The main tool I'll be using for the entire installation of this project is going to be this Bostik floor staple nailer. Now this thing takes 16 gauge 2-inch long staples, which provide extreme strength and durability when it comes time for us to actually nail these boards in place. Now we will be using this for the vast majority, but there are a couple sections where we're going to need adhesive, and that's where Bostik's best adhesives comes into play, because this is one of the gold standards of flooring adhesives. For the stair nosing, we're not able to use the nailer that I just showed because of how it actually positions itself onto the wood. Therefore, we actually have to glue these pieces down first and then top nail them into the corners, because any corner penetrations won't be seen due to the fact that there's going to be wall base there. I insert a flooring tongue into the groove side of the nosing, and therefore once we install our flooring right into it, it's going to be a perfect fit and will last for years to come, because we have strength of adhesive as well as nailing once we have it all in place. Just make sure you wipe up the excess glue as quickly as possible with a clean cloth, and then finish it off with a bit of mineral spirits, which will take care of the rest. Once we top nailed the corners, I then grabbed our flooring nailer and nailed down the first board. And as you can see, this is why I did this, because we have a perfect nosing to full board transition, which would be impossible to get if we started on the opposite side of the room. I top nail the corner in place to make sure it doesn't move when I actually use our floor nailer, and once I have this first board in, I butt our second piece of flooring right up against it and then top nail that corner. Now behind these two pieces of flooring is going to be our base cabinets for the kitchen, but the owner doesn't know exactly where the layout is going to be and what type of appliances they're going to have, so we decided to go ahead and just go over this area with the flooring to make sure and guarantee that we didn't have any issues down the road, because normally you'd find plywood underneath your kitchen cabinets, but instead we're going to guarantee that we have a beautiful hardwood floor all the way across. After we apply our adhesive with a 1/4 inch V-notch trowel, I then position the tongue and grooves into each other, and with a little assistance from our pull bar. This pull bar makes it extremely easy to get into tight knit areas to make sure that our flooring is as snug as humanly possible. But in some areas, of course, we do have to cut the boards down to size, and that's where the table saw comes in perfectly, because we can run our boards all the way through at the correct depth, and then also use our pull bar to get them snug, and then finally tack them in place with our nailer around the perimeter, because again, those nail holes will be covered up by our wall base. At this point in time, I do also highly suggest installing a few flooring shims around the perimeter, because we want to guarantee ourselves that there's no movement for any of these sections as we install the rest of our boards. As I'm installing all of these boards, you will also notice that I'm using a unique mallet, and this is actually specifically a flooring mallet because it has a soft tip end, which is a soft face that protects the floor and the nailer as we're hitting it, but it also has a very hard structural side, which is basically used when you need to put a little extra oomph to make sure that all these boards are fit snugly in place.
One full row all the way across the room. This is what you want. So you have one continuous piece going down. So we did the hard part, which is all this. Now we're gonna do the fun part, which is all this. Woo!
After you install a few rows, you do quickly understand that you're going to need some help when trying to hammer all these boards in place. In order to make it as easy as possible, I actually cut 3 pieces of equal length of flooring, nailed them together on both the top and the bottom side, and you have this perfect little block. This little block adds a lot of weight and punch when you're actually hitting your floor mallet into it, and therefore making it much easier to get these boards in place. And that's what we want, because we want a perfect seam all the way down each board when it connects from board to board. As you make your way through the room, you will find some obstacles, just like this one. And in order to get around this obstacle, I just make 2 little marks on both sides so I know exactly where I need to cut. I then extend those lines all the way across the board and bring it to my table saw, where I can get a perfect cut all the way down the long side, and then use my jigsaw to cut the shorter side, which just makes life easier. And again, remember, those cuts don't have to be perfect because they're going to be hidden with the wall base. Just try and make sure you provide a bit of breathing room, because you do want 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch of wall space between the wall and the wood flooring. That way, if this flooring does surprisingly move over time, you have a bit of space. Luckily for us, engineered hardwood flooring doesn't move that much compared to solid wood flooring, but it can move over time. A few key notes about this flooring nailer is that it is connected to my air compressor, and you do have to dial it in somewhat, because if you have it dialed too high, then the nail itself might actually go through the tongue. But if it's set too low, or you hit the nailer too gently with the hammer, then the nail might stick up and you have to actually pound it down or remove it altogether with some pliers. As for a proper staple or nailing pattern, I actually nail a couple inches away from each end, and then every other 6 inches. That might be a little excessive for some, but I want to guarantee ourselves that we have proper installation that won't come loose over time. As noted before, this is a nailer that utilizes staples, but you can use just a regular nail in order to adhere these boards down in place, but with staples you get twice the penetration for a single hit, and I appreciate that. Another item that you want to make sure you're accounting for is the seams, and you want to guarantee that all these seams are at least 6 inches away from each other if it's from board to board, but you also want to make sure that the seams that you have don't align with other seams down the line. That will provide you with a random variable pattern, and therefore your eye won't catch something that looks odd or unnatural, because we want a natural look and feel to this entire space. In a perfect world, we would always have a room that's square with 90-degree corners, but we don't live in a perfect world, and therefore some type of unique corner variance is always going to come up in the vast majority of wood installation projects. Luckily for us on this project, I checked with our speed square, and we have a 45-degree angle adjacent to all of our straight walls. Therefore, the angle was extremely easy to figure out. It was just a matter of making sure we were cutting that at the appropriate angle with our chop saw or our jigsaw. Once we hit these large open spaces, it was extremely easy to install the vast majority of all of this flooring. But you do have to realize that this is a living room and kitchen, and therefore we have quite a few things we need to move around. Personally, the best and easiest way to take care of this is to maneuver all the items from one side of the room to the other once you have half of the room done. Therefore, you are able to keep them in the same space, but you're still able to work around them quickly and easily. Just keep that in mind on your next flooring project. The only other obstacles that we really have in our way at this point are the vents. Yep, we have a few vents that we have to take care of and account for, and the jigsaw makes quick work of the vent hole, which makes the installation portion extremely easy. And with a little over half the room done, I quickly realized how incredibly gorgeous this flooring truly is, and it is completely transforming the overall look and space. I want to say a big huge thank you to our sponsor this week, Flooring Direct Warehouse, because they provided all the materials for this project. They truly provide extremely high quality flooring at a discounted rate because they cut out the middleman. So if you want to personally check out their amazing lineup to choose from, then I will make sure and leave a link in the description box below for this very flooring. If you find yourself in a position where you can't use your pull bar to minimize the seam between the ends of each board, then use a piece of painter's tape. Apply that to one side and then hold on tight, because as long as you apply a bit of pressure laterally, that seam will stay in place and you will minimize the overall gap. As you get closer and closer to your finish line, you will quickly realize that you're running out of space for your flooring nailer. Therefore, I actually take my other nailer and position it at the appropriate angle in order for me to shoot nails into the top of the tongue. Therefore, I'm applying a row of nails that fully secure the board in place. I have to do this to the last couple rows of our installation, which also coincides with the last 2 vents that I have to install. This floor vent actually fits perfectly within the width of one of our boards, and therefore I pre-drill my holes first and then go around it with our jigsaw. These edges will be covered up eventually with the floor vent, but you do want to protect these boards as much as possible, which is why I applied some blue painter's tape first. The nice thing about this circumstance is that I was actually able to use the hole with the pull bar and our flooring mallet to make sure that we had them fully snug up against our adjacent row. So you know how I can actually confirm that our spacing was correct? Because that vent over there had the same measurements as right here. Because we had 3/4 of an inch here and 4 3/4 of an inch right here. Same spacing on this vent and that vent, which means we're perfectly square. Woo! Or rectangular, one of the two. A simple measurement like that truly makes the world of difference because it guarantees that this floor was installed perfectly square, and it all started with that very first row. So keep that in mind and just remember how important that very first row truly is. Our last row of flooring is just a couple inches wide, which is why I run a few pieces of flooring through our table saw at the correct width, then position them correctly and top nail them because, again, the wall base will cover up any nail holes on top. As for the door entry, I did have to be a little bit more accurate in these locations because these are going to be finish cuts that you will see the sides of at some point because the trim doesn't go all the way around here. Therefore, we have to have a very nice snug fit, which we do, and in the areas where I can nail down flush, I do. After I made our way around the doorway, it was a straight shot to the end of the wall. And the only other tool that I haven't talked about is this small pry bar. It really did help, especially in some tight-knit areas, so get one of those, and as always, I'll make sure and leave links in the description box below on all the tools and materials seen in this video. And speaking of materials, this is an area floor vent. Super slick and unique design, which actually incorporates the cut off pieces that I had for the vents. Don't throw these out because these do come in extremely handy because we're going to use a scrap for the center of our vents. And to make it look super easy, all you have to do is make a few measurements and cut 4 sides perfectly straight. I find that taking the first 2 or 3 cuts first on the chop saw and then going through with the table saw at the tail end to make sure we have a perfect width is the easiest way to get this matched up. But because this tray is a bit deeper than our engineered hardwood flooring, I do have to cut a small piece of scrap plywood and insert that first into the channel and then insert our beautiful wood flooring. You can apply adhesive to this box, but this thing fits so snugly that this thing is never coming out. But just remember that if you do run across a section where you have a vent that has 2 pieces running across, you do want to cut it to the same width to make sure it has a cohesive transition between the vent and the flooring. But with that last vent in, we are done with this section of wood flooring, of course. A lot of hard work went into the installation of this wood floor, and as you can see, this is one truly amazing transformation to what it was before to what it has turned into, has added elegance and grace and beauty to this entire space, and is truly one beautiful, sexy beast. But we have more flooring to do, which includes a glue down on a concrete slab and stairs, but that can wait till next week.